Oh, yes, oh, yes. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Wine Shark Wednesday. Glenn Boswell, Wine Shark, back with you here again to chit chat about all topics of wine and talk about our grocery store grab and talk about the Wine Shark Project and other such things. So, good day for everybody. Good day to Mary from Minnesota. Hope everybody's having a good midweek. It's always nice to look at the downside of the rest of the week. It's Wednesday afternoon and a couple days of work ahead of everybody. So I hope everybody's week is going well. It's been a very busy week for me here, kind of running and churning on the treadmill of life. John Kerry, hola to you as well, my friend. So, been working on a few different things as far as Wine Shark is concerned. Functional stuff that you guys may start noticing for those who come to shows, etc. The tax rules and stuff have been all updating and been getting all my sales tax and stuff in line. So not only Eventbrite, but PayPal and everywhere else, all the other vendors that I use, getting it all nice and aligned and passing the lovely sales tax on to you, my dear listeners. So just you may see that variation coming up here. I'd also been doing some work about transitioning from Eventbrite to doing tickets directly for sales for online tastings, but that's part of the churn that I've been doing. Been having some difficulties getting it working the way I want to. So for the foreseeable future, we'll continue on with Eventbrite, but we're gonna start changing up how that works as well, just in the July timeframe. So look for those to be upcoming. But you, though, the viewer, will see very little difference. It's mostly back end stuff. So also started doing things for the July tastings. I just finished lining out the first 4 weeks of July. I've got to figure out I got to finish up the fifth show, what the actual wines are. But I've selected all the wines and the foods and the cheeses and that sort of thing. But in the effort and what will probably be an ongoing go forward type deal, wine.com options are being offered with them as well. So you'll have Total Wine and you'll have wine.com. Generally speaking, their wines are going to be identical, but there might be a few variations of theme here and there. Again, that's not a bad thing, but that brings everybody into, from a nationwide perspective. Well, hello there, Mr. and Miss Donna. Good to see you in the chat this afternoon. Hope everybody's going to grab a glass and join us. We're just doing kind of weekly recap. So that's the business end of things, but we're going to talk today about two things. We're going to talk a little bit of rant and editorial thing. We're going to talk about artisan versus factory, the pros and cons at an artistic level of the differences in styles of wine between big mass-produced wines and smaller handmade artisanal wines. And then we're going to talk about the grocery store grab. So we're going to talk about Dark Horse Sauvignon Blanc, which is what's in my glass right now. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about the impetus of this particular little topic. So I was listening to an excellent podcast from Vinepair, wonderful industry news outlet, and various content creators. They do some really amazing stuff over there. A lot of great articles. They have access to a lot of fun people. And they did a podcast interview with the wine critic for the New York Times, Eric Asimov. And the article caught my attention because it's kind of it's what makes a wine good. It's a nice 30 some odd 38-minute, I think, podcast. A nice, compact chunk of data for you to kind of go listen to. So if you're a fan of podcasts, I've linked it in the description below. But that kind of inspired me to talk about it because what makes wine good, and some of the other taglines about him talking about the difference between mass-produced wines, and he specifically mentions the Prisoner and other types of wines and how not to be a wine snob. And after listening to it, I came away with a couple of things and a whole shit ton of commentary of my own. Bottom line, it came out to the difference between factory-produced, mass-produced wines and artisanal, handmade, handcrafted wines. There were some things that kind of made the statement that he didn't really believe that the grocery store was necessarily the best venue for people to find wine. Of course, that's because of some of the marketing issues, but that he kind of basically denied that there really was good access to wine, and that depending on the level of motivation and your priority to want to understand and get into wine, it's how much and how long are you willing, how much time are you willing to invest to find quote unquote good wine. And this brought up a lot of conversations that I've had in the past with wine loving friends, with other people in the industry, with beer loving friends, that kind of thing, and talking about the concept of, is the concept laudable? Which is better, as mass production or artisanal? Or specifically, is there real as much value as we tend to place on things when it comes to artisan stuff? Or craft, if you want to use the word from the beer world, right? We don't really call it craft wine. We generally call it fine wine, but or handmade or artisanal wine. So this applies, in my opinion, to a lot of things. And in fact, we're going to really talk about it at the artistic level. Because if we start thinking about wine as a subjective topic, right? The idea of whether you enjoy it or not is subjective. That's kind of the root of where we're going to have this conversation, right? I'm not going to get in. So this is not a pedantic article about what specifically makes up wine. I mean, you guys have heard me that I'm a big fan of it's made from grapes only and has to be between this alcohol and that alcohol, but blah blah blah. What I want to talk to you about is what are the virtues and vices of factory versus artisanal. So my first question is there a laudable difference between the two? Or no, there is a noticeable difference. Is choosing one or the other an inherently good or laudable task? Because I think each has its virtues and each has its vices. When we talk about factory and mass-produced wines, most of the stuff that we see at the grocery store, at the liquor store, most of the wines that pretty much anybody knows, that's at that factory level. Okay, and the virtues of the factory is that it's economical, it's accessible, and it's consistent. That the wines are produced in such a way that they're doing their best to ensure the same product year in, year out, day after, such season after season, to produce a product that their customers love and expect. It's economical, and it ranges anywhere from the $2 chucks of the world all the way up to, let's say, the 30, 40, $50 bottles of wine, which can still be considered mass market. Asimov specifically cites The Prisoner, which is an interesting choice because that was a kind of rogue wine production thing that went into the hype world that then got bought up and turned into the Prisoner Wine Company. And it's a name that everybody knows. It's spurred off many, lookalike labels. I mean, it's really an interesting choice, I think, for that concept of mass production. And if that's what we're going to call that, I mean, we're still talking about a $30 bottle of wine. So we're not just talking about, Ian J. Gallo and Sutter Home and a bottle of Mad Dog here. We're talking about wines that are in that medium price range. So this problem, the foible, of course, the vice for factory produced wines is it's stereotypical, right? It is not particularly experimental. They go with what's safe. It's marketing driven rather than necessarily merit driven. It's very corporate. If you're into the mode of supporting the little guy, mass produced wines are not your friend. They're not about the individual winemaker and maybe even the individual consumer. They are a business and they're there to make money. And so if you've got from that pose and perspective, it's, that's the devil, kind of problem. We go to the other side of the coin. We talk about artisanal wines, right? Artisanal wines, their virtues are, they're varied, that they have a lot more breadth of the styles that you're going to find. They're crafted with care, this handcrafted idea that each one of the batches that the person who's working on the wine from the vineyard all the way through the cellar has either a personal stake or passion for the project they're doing, right? Something that may not be able to be said for some of these bigger mass market wines. Although I'd beg to argue that, I've seen and been to winemaking facilities that produce millions of gallons of bottles or millions of bottles a year. And frankly, these people really do care about what they do. I mean, just the volume and the differences are obviously one night and day. So they're crafted with care. They're varied. They can be ephemeral. The idea that they're going to be the same year in, year out is not a thing. In fact, that's one of the things that makes them kind of unique and interesting. So those are some of the virtues for that. From the other side of the coin, though, the vices are just as bad or just as equal to the factory side of things. Artisanal wine and handcrafted wine is expensive. because it's smaller batch overall. They do not get economies of scale. They're harder to find. You have to work to get them. You do not just walk into your store and find them. The convenience level is there. They're inconvenient to get to. They're hard to support because of the convenience level. Unless you're going to join their elite wine club and put in some risk, they're more difficult to do than just simply going and buying your local favorites. And then ephemeral, the opposite negative word to that is inconsistent. They're not producing a product that comes out where I can expect the quality to necessarily be high. So my analogy here in the music world is, the factory wines are the top 40. They're these bands that are tuned for the masses. They get out there, they're popular. You might love and you love them, and they're a lot of fun, and there's something that you enjoy. Are they at the peak and the height of what the art of music is? Probably not. But that doesn't mean that millions upon millions of people don't, enjoy them and love them. On the flip side, the Artisan is that great local band that nobody's really heard. But the weird thing is they're, just dying to do so, right? There's this idea that lost and small artist does something truly unique and has a special art of their very own that is just dying to get out there. And, that's an interesting kind of opposite polar thing from a lot of this. And remember, I'm going to be referring a lot to wine and in art in and out of this, and using those same sort of analogies to think about, well, if it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander, right? Because while there is a mix of things, right? Wine is a consumable product, and it goes away once we have the enjoyment. In other words, the act of drinking it is an inherently destructive act that changes it forever. Right. Well, that's different than the fact that I can listen to my Police Synchronicity, MP3s as many as times as I want, and they still are just freaking awesome. So, and the Mozart and my Vivaldi, and insert your great and classic here. So, one of the other things that Asimov talks about is the educational divide. And that it was posited the question about grocery stores trying to educate customers by demanding and providing alternatives to mass market wines within their store shelves, which I think is kind of a gross misunderstanding of how competitive that particular scene is, and how the grocery store's job is rarely to present you with a bunch of options and challenge your way of thinking and choices. If you're there for convenience, and then the grocery store is for your convenience, then what people want is what they need to sell. Their job is not to be educators. Now, having and by the way, putting stuff on their shelves that doesn't move because nobody understands what it is, no matter how good it is a waste of their time and money. It's bad for their business model. So I think that's even just a non-argument. But the argument was brought up about sommeliers, educators, wine industry insiders, influencers, etc. Well, that's kind of our job. I mean, our job is the inspiration. Pardon me, I'm flying my nose. Inspiration and motivation for you, the curious wine drinker, that who wants to dive into this art. If you want to learn more, we're there to inspire that learning. We're there to light that fire. We're there to go, cool. You love The Prisoner. You think it's awesome. It's a Zinfandel blend. Let's talk about why that's cool, and let's go explore new other things that are out there in the vein that you might love and enjoy as well. Right? I mean, that's, to me, the kind of core. That's kind of our job. That's not the grocery store's job, and that's not even your wine vendor's job. I mean, your wine vendor in that case, I think, is a collaborator, right? The guy that runs an awesome wine shop, his job is to root out and find and get access to those things that you, the consumer, don't. His job is to be that liaison. And so that's a much more apt example. But I'll also dare you to go look on something as broad market as wine.com and show me where they're throwing you the Artisan first. Bullshit. They're there to move wine just like anybody else. And while they might have great and fantastic access, they don't even touch the small guys and give them an opportunity to get out there because they simply don't have enough to move. It's why that direct link from winery to consumer is such an important thing. And I'll go back and update and put a pump in here for freethegrapes.org. Keeping the laws good so that you can get winery delivered direct to you from that artisan is an integral part of this whole topic. Right. So I'm going to save that rant for legal day, but we'll go from that. The other thing that this is the part where the tagline and the podcast read about not becoming a wine snob, and I actually came away from that thing thinking that the exact opposite. That while Asimov is a fantastic critic, in my opinion, I think he does great work. I think he's got an amazing audience share. I think he has got a lot to say and a very good access to a lot of stuff. But that in that trap comes the pedestal of isolation and separation from the masses. Where are you on that pyramid? And it came across to me what the point of how, if the idea is how hard you're willing to work and what you're willing to spend to experience your art, that's a very slippery slope. And that path I can definitely say lies snobbery. For instance, where is the table wine that that nobody's talking about? Because on the one hand, everybody that I have ever met as a professional educator and wine industry person who has had a European wine experience, they get a chance to go over to Europe. They're going around, they're hanging around Italy, Spain, Germany, France, doesn't matter where it is. It's the wine producing nation. They come back with this awestruckness of, man, the wine there was everywhere. It was inexpensive. It was so good. It was this, it was that. And I'm like, yeah, but and what they're drinking? They're drinking, vin de table. They're drinking just, standard vino that's sold $3 a liter, over there, and €3 a liter. It's their common table wine, but that's not what any of these people are saying that we're missing out on. They're not trying to champion that and get that over here. Instead, they're trying to compare the table wine market from America with the fine wine market from the Europeans. And I'm like, okay, that's not a fair comparison. Where is and what are we comparing that table market to? If it's not in the if it's not in the US, and if it's not comparable, because by the way, those EU wines are never going to get here, right? There's no margin, there's no money to be made bringing over inexpensive wines that are meant to be consumed early to our markets, so they don't get here. Instead, we have our own versions. So there's what it is. Again, to use our pop music analogy, we don't listen to a bunch of French pop music over here because generally speaking, it doesn't have a market. Right. I mean, but that's just an example, a similar sort of nature. So the weird thing there is that how serious do you have to be about art to enjoy it? Can you not just enjoy it? That's the thing that to me I took away, and it starts to smack of snobbery. And it's something that I try to be very careful about in not only my wine forming opinions and just in how I try and teach, because there is an economic barrier that is often perceived with wine, right? We talk about this a lot in the show, just about, when we talk about price points. But the reality is no one who's drinking The Prisoner and is educated about wine is proclaiming it to be the crown jewel of wines. Only those people who are just happy drinking it and haven't yet had any better. They're the ones who are like, oh my God, this is the most amazing wine ever, right? And oftentimes they'll go up in a couple notches and they'll get into a cult wine trap, and they'll be like, okay, this tiny little cult wine, tiny production artisanal wine that I love is the best thing on the planet, even though they've never tried or anything outside 2 or 3 varietals of wine, right? Or they get stuck up in name traps. You go to the European side of things, and the who is more important than the juice by half the time. So it's my opinion that just enjoying the wine is perfectly okay. Just having a level of wine drinking knowledge to go, I enjoy it, I'm trying to figure out what I enjoy so I can enjoy more of it, is perfectly fine. There's no obligation to become educated and to seek out that next level unless that's what you're into. That's that thing becoming a consumer and becoming a connoisseur. Okay. Connoisseur is just harder to spell than snob. So, but the snob difference is looking down your nose at other people who, just because you like that pop music and you don't listen to classical music, well, you must be somehow flawed. Okay. My other question is the factory really drowning out the artisan? One of the arguments sometimes made is that, big wine, big beer, big spirits, it makes it hard to be the little guy and get started. Yeah, it's true. That's in a market-driven economy, it's tough to be the little guy. It always is. There's a reason that the concept of the starving artist exists. Your art may not earn you fame and fortune. It may not appeal to the mass market. And so just because you're doing it and just because it's different, just because it's avant-garde, then you need to be doing it for art's sake and you need to not be doing it for the market's sake. So the big guys don't really fucking matter, do they? You know, if they're going to continue producing The Prisoner and making it in a style that doesn't change and it sits around with the Northern California Zinfandel blend, fine. That doesn't stop you from making a cool, all natural Alicante Boucher using ancient methods in a clay tank wiped down by your aunt every day at the end of your shift. Okay, it doesn't stop you. And if the idea is I can't make money doing it, there's a lot of things in the world that are like that. So that argument again doesn't seem to me having anything to do with the art. It has to do with the finances. So, you know, so to kind of sum up, you know, I believe that both the factory and the artisan are necessary within the art worlds in both cases. You know, it's porque no las dos. You need to decide for yourself where handcrafted is desirable or not. Is having little flaws or errors or differences in something a charm, a benefit? You know, we talk about a handcrafted piece of pottery. Every piece is unique and different, and that in itself is inherent value. Would you accept that from your wine? Where you one time you get a bottle, and the next time you get the bottle tastes off because that one's broken. Don't worry, it's just unique. Doesn't seem right. By way of an allegory, which I believe is the correct word here, story from my own personal experience, in that I had the opportunity to meet the master distiller for Four Roses, a bourbon company, who, long story short, they do their basic yellow label, their bottom line, just mass market bourbon, uses, if I remember serves, 5 different yeast strains and 3 different grain bills that they use to blend together to make the optimal flavor for their whiskey that they use time in and time out. Their aim is for that when you pick up a bottle of Yellow Rose, that it's going to taste the same today that it does in 10 years from now and it did 10 years ago, because that consistency of quality is their aspirational goal. Now, they do make upper end, higher tier in cost artisanal products that are handcrafted, barrel labeled, etc. They show that whole spectrum. But to quote, you know, my friend Bob, who's quoting some of his famous beer dudes, whose name is drawing a total blank right now. Sorry, Bob. But the bottom line is, if you can't brew the same thing time after time after time, then you can't brew. Right? In the beer world, if you can't make the same beer over and over and over again, then you can't make beer. You can't cook the same way over and over and over again. If you can't do the same thing with your wine, you can't do it. Okay. You've got to have some level of consistency. I'm okay with a little variation, but let's also talk about where that value lives, especially when you go up the scale. Imagine your disappointment when your $500 bottle of wine turns out to be one of those ones that, oh, they just had an off day with that bottle. That would kind of suck. So art is always about access, money, and attitude. I don't care what they're talking about. Music, painting, food, wine. Generally speaking, higher prices demand higher quality, and vice versa. Higher quality commands a higher price. So you have to decide for yourself, and as a consumer, at what economic price are you not supposed to enjoy wine, right? Where, if you can't afford X, should you just not try? I don't believe that that's a thing. I think that's where that factory serves a very important purpose. And the denial that there was an interesting discussion on the podcast about gateways, about how the wines are not, that there wasn't a correlation between drinking orange juice and then later going on to drink wine. And I said, well, if you don't start listening to music, you're never going to start listening to the classics anyway. So if the idea is that you just don't jump into the deep end of the wine pool that you shouldn't jump in at all, I think is complete fallacy, and you're missing a whole lot of great world. So, all right. So there. End rant. It's a whole lot of material, a whole lot of opinion. I think I ranted, for 20 minutes on a podcast that's only 38 minutes long, which should tell you something about my level of opinion on that. And like I said, I love the guys from I love the guys from Vinepair. I love the guys from Isaac. I love Asimov. Eric Asimov is a great guy. Again, but I can't agree from that industry perspective. I have an alternative opinion that I think comes from lower down the food chain, and that's I guess the weird part is I think that's also a big part of where I want to remain, is that this is not about. I mean, I idolize some people in the wine world who are doing that crazy, awesome, sketchy, little, tiny, expensive slash esoteric thing. It's kick ass, but I've only got so much access to the stuff that I've got, and I don't want to. In fact, a lesson the lesson to me was actually taught fairly early in my wine loving career, and it was the flip side. I started reading Wine Spectator. I started reading. They would have a pull-out list in the tasting section, the rating section, that you could basically, it was perforated. You could take it out and take it with you to the wine store. And here was a list of all their recommended stuff, both on whatever theme they were doing that month, but just in general from each one of the regions. And I'd go there with my little list in hand, going, showing up to my Tony's wine store, going, looking at the list, going, okay. And nothing on there was there. Because what I had access to, and I had a wine store that had a pretty, I would call it an arguably decent wine room. They were to the point where they had an entirely separate section. And I don't mean section of store. I mean, the building was divided in two with a incandescent light only, humidity and temperature controlled wine room that was several thousand square feet. Okay. And but I couldn't get access to 98% of the stuff I was seeing on the list. So I was like, wait, I've got to get out of this mindset and figure out how to start appreciating wine. Otherwise, I'm just going to sit around waiting for stuff like this. And this is this is in the late 90s. And so, internet wine, et cetera, is really not yet a thing. So there seem to be bleak options out there. And so I had to take a personal interest in discovering some things on my own, so. And the answer to Mr. John Kerry, that is correct. That is a Flynn's shirt from Tron, which is, for those that know me from the Renaissance Festival, also my character name. And so therefore, double entendre. So, all right. Well, let's go talk about the grocery store grab now that we've sat there and stood up for grocery stores and the fact that, hey, people want to drink, let them. So the grocery store grab, for recap purposes, we're going to talk about the premise of this particular segment is to help get the best value per dollar for wines found at non-specialty and non-big box retailers. And I won't say the internet because you can probably get most of these on the internet. So I choose the wines at my local grocery store without prior research into them, based on the label only. So there's really kind of a label focus, because the thing that I'd like wineries to adapt and people to understand is that I want to be able to know more than just the pretty pictures on the bottle, what's inside based on that label. Pardon me. So this week's selezione is Dark Horse Sauvignon Blanc. Now, again, I would say I don't do any prior research, but that doesn't mean I haven't heard of the wines before. I've actually had this brand sometime before. As a graphic design minor from my collegiate years, their logo is friggin' awesome. I mean, you got the little dark horse with the little nose thing, and it's in the shape of this guy. Some art student gets extra credit for that particular thing for the agency that they hired. Totally cool logo. Badass. I believe that this was $8.89 at the time of checkout. It was advertised at, I think, $15.89. Again, showing that little disparity between non-club and club prices, highly incentivized for you to get. So bottom line price, though, is what we care about. We really want to see, and we'll probably compare whether this would punch at that level or whether that's just grocery store inflation, as we seem to commonly understand. So let's break down the label. We'll talk about a little bit about this. We've got the Dark Horse logo, as we already talked about. Kind of they're in this mode of kind of a simple elegance, right? They're not doing too much with the actual label itself. It's the original Dark Horse, apparently. In case you were wondering about if it's Katy Perry being the Dark Horse or some other type of horse, perhaps a moderately gray horse, not the full dark one. This is a 2016 Sauvignon Blanc from California. So we've got brand, we've got grape, we've got location, we've got year. Good front of the label information. They're definitely doing this part right. They're not just marketing to you here, which is good. ABV is 13% alcohol by volume. A little hot for the style, but That's not a big deal. On the back here, this is what what I read, and when I picked it up, decided to bring it into the show for the good label examples, which is kind of the thing I'm trying to do. I'll go ahead and read it for you here. So, Dark Horse winemaker Beth Liston believes that fortune favors the bold. All right. Her pioneering approach to viticulture and winemaking champions quality, originality, and above all, taste. So, I don't know what her innovations were, but her pioneering approach was. But okay, cool. We're all about the taste. Here's the kicker, right? That's your marketing paragraph. That's check. You're allowed to have that. Next, here's what I want to hear. A bold wine with a big personality. This Sauvignon Blanc is exceptional flavors of lively pink grapefruit, backed with notes of fresh tropical fruit and bright citrus with a crisp, vibrant finish. Nice, tight, flavorful descriptors. That is what I'm looking for when I want to see a wine description, right? That tells me if I didn't know anything about this grape and anything about this winery, this is what I'm getting in the bottle. Pour a glass and let us know what you think. We might indeed, Dark Horse. We're doing it right now. And then they've got their Facebook, Instagram, and the usual government warnings about things that you shouldn't do while under the influence of a dark horse. So there it is. But Modesto, California, so kind of indicated of bottling. Modesto's in the Central Valley, down the way a bit. Not big wine country, but this is mass produced by definition, right? We're talking about $9 California Sauvignon Blanc. This is squarely in the grocery store model and range. So that's it has done all of it's said to do. So far, let's just say if it does what it says on the tin, it's really exactly what we would want to expect. So our labels told us what's in the bottle, where the grapes are grown, flavors. I mean, they're doing their label so far. To me, they're A+ing it, right? Actually, we got to go A- because the only thing they're not. Well, hello, we're having a little fire station thing going by. Anyway, the only thing they didn't do is they didn't provide any particular food pairing suggestions. They're leaving that to you. That's another area I'd like them to get into. But again, I can see that as so long as the flavor information is there, if I know how to pair with food, that's at least a step along the way. So B+, A- as far as this stuff is concerned. All the information was readily available and easy to find. So let's give it a taste. Let's see where we go here. Do our tasting notes in our grid here. The color is very pale, almost got very yellow highlights and no real green tones to it. Nice pale straw. Nice bright reflection, star bright. Nothing wrong with the wine, the flaws. Looking at that. Jumps out of the glass, big nose, Sauvignon Blanc. As it says, when they say bold, this is what they mean. This wine is not shy. It jumps out of the glass and says, "Hi, I'm this wine, and here's how I smell." So nice, big, bold aromas. They absolutely hit you with citrus, grapefruit. I can easily see the pink grapefruit because it's in that sense of it doesn't have a sharpness to it. The acidity is there. We don't have any of that 4 MMP Sauvignon Blanc nature. For those of you, the distinctive cat piss and nose is not present here. But I definitely get that kind of fresh citrus peel. Yeah, very nice. Again, very much just the whole nose speaks of fresh, crisp, and clean. I mean, I'm sure Febreze would bottle this if they could, as far as the aroma department is concerned. All right. Acidity is medium plus. We're hitting in that nice, juicy, all around our mouth acid feel. Exactly what we would want if we knew what Sauvignon Blanc was. That is, again, it is bold in the mouth. It is an assertive wine. It is not palate dominating in that tannic grip and fruit flavor way. Instead, the acid presents first. It makes your whole mouth water. All right. That's that crispness that we talk about. When we say that word, that we want that acidity to bite into it. It's like biting into that piece of citrus fruit, lemon, etc., or raw, nice raw fruit with that good acid grip. But the pH and this pH has got to be pretty low. Then this is certainly not the highest of that. It's not what I would call those razor sharp acidity that I've seen in other Sauvignon Blancs. It's a little softer than that, but Very palpable, very on style. As far as the flavors are concerned. Now, again, getting past the acidity and getting into the flavors is what's left over for Sauvignon Blanc. Sauvignon Blanc has that bright flash, and then when your palate comes back from the flat from looking at the flash, it's what do I see left? Here, it's a Meyer lemon. I can see that pink grapefruit. Right, it's got that lingering little acidity in the back of your tongue, that sour twinge, a little bit of that sour candy effect. No residual sugar, very bone dry. It's in and it's gone. Its finish lingers mostly in the acid effect. I think it's much more of the chemical effect of the wine rather than a flavor components lingering around. But you do get a little bit of that final lemon pith or peel, maybe some lemon grass. There's not much green in here. It's mostly a citrus bomb. Again, not a complaint, just is a thing. Doesn't have anything that people would fear in the world of California Sauvignon Blancs about it being grown in a warm climate wine or this or that or the other thing. So this is very eminently drinkable, really kind of nice, crisp and clean. Now, again, it's a mass-produced wine. I would love to see, more information and details on what some of these pioneering and innovative winemaking techniques are, and what puts it at that particular price point, right? I mean, it's not highly extracted, it's not wildly complicated, but it is perfectly drinkable and answering our usual three questions. Is it well executed? Absolutely. I mean, this is not the most outstanding Sauvignon Blanc I've ever had, but it is 100% on point, right? Is it on style? I would say yes. If you're talking about California style, it doesn't have the fun peach pitted fruit, grapefruit notes that I might get out of a New Zealand one, and it doesn't have the grassy herbalness of a Upper Loire or Entre du Mer, blend that you might see out of France. This for fans of Pinot Grigio, I would love. It's got that lemon dollop in there, that very crisp and clean dollop of lemon, which I think other Pinot Grigio folks would enjoy. But again, I would call it an adult people's wine because that acidity is nothing to mess around with. If you're looking for a soft, gentle, hang out on the porch kind of thing, this is not your thing. This one stands up with attention. Very good food wine. Would have some fun opportunities to help cleanse your palate for seafood, ceviche. That ceviche would be totally good with this. Guacamole. Do something fun where this is the squeeze of lime on the guacamole instead of a lime, right? Or still lime your guacamole to keep it from browning, but you get my point. This would fare very well with that creamy sour texture, right? Mexican food can see a lot of things in that range with this. Anything from the simple grilled fajita and more robustness all the way through to using, it's a margarita replacement, which I don't believe I actually just said that out loud, but you get my meaning. Yeah, not bad at all. Interestingly enough, I think the first time that I had a wine from them, I think I had a Pinot Grigio of theirs, and it was down at the Jexa Energy Center for the Depeche Mode concert that my sister took me to for my birthday, which that itself shows how awesome of a sister I have. But since it's at a concert pavilion, they don't give you bottles, but they basically take a whole bottle and pour it into a plastic carafe with a little lid on it that I still happen to have and use for making iced tea. But excellent then and excellent now. I got to say that for a grocery store level wine, that's definitely a name I think you can kind of put some trust in. So awesome. Well, we're getting to go pretty fast at that. The grocery store grab isn't taking nearly as long as it used to. So we're gonna have to start coming up with more content, or I'm gonna have to go back to ranting about art because everybody's kind of quiet in chat today. So because we could do an extended moment of silence, awkward silence pause for the last say 20 minutes of the show, or just sit here and you wonder, is the camera still on or is it paused? Some sort of monkish thing. So what do you guys got for me? What kind of questions, interesting and rash political statements? There's lots going on in the world. I've got, in fact, to dive into things to come. I'll skip to the coming soon real quick. We're going to have rosé all day. Not really all day. We're going to have rosé for a featured wine online tasting this Friday. Then the 26th, a week from Friday, is Wines and the Grill, the first grilled edition of Wines Plus. Bubbles is scheduled for July 3rd, and the rest of the calendar will be released in the next 48 hours, which, FYI, we've got, just to give you a hint, we're going to do Wine and Cheese Part 2. So it goes Bubbles, Wine and Cheese Part 2, Picnic Wines, Zinfandel Picnic Wines, and then wrap up the month with Pinot Noir. So July is going to be a whole ton of fun. I cannot wait for some of these topics to get up there. So Donna Den says she loves art. All right. Well, so tell me about that. Tell me what that means there, Donna. You like Buffalo Trace, an excellent side project of Jim Beam. Yes. Harlan's favorite, but likes Four Roses too. Absolutely. The when it comes to, again, the Buffalo Trace is an artisanal arm of the Jim Beam production house, if I am correct. I'm 85, 90% on that. But that's the deal, is that people will get very brand snappy, especially in whiskeys and spirits and even in beers and wines. And that is a slippery slope, because how your wines are actually made. Actually, I'll go to use your example. I'll use bourbon again. Another master distiller story that I have, because I've been blessed with good opportunities. I met the master distiller for Austin Nichols Wild Turkey. I met Jimmy Russell, and that was a thing, because I've been drinking Wild Turkey as a bourbon since I was in college, and my grandfather used to drink it, and he actually reminds me a lot of my grandfather. So meeting him was a weird, intimidating, kind of awesome experience. We're having this little bourbon, and he says, okay, so we're talking about the limited number of actual distillers, of people who actually distill within the bourbon world. And he says, you name every whiskey you can name, and I'll tell you whether they distill themselves. So I'm sitting there talking to this, icon of mine, and trying to like blur out and remember every single bourbon I can possibly name. And he's going, no, yes. And there's only like 5 in the Valley that still do it. Now he says it's a good old boys network. Everybody that generally tends to be, it's not a highly competitive industry in the way that having a distillery of your own is good, because you have certain types of controls. But remember, there's a lot more to the process than just the distillery. In the same way for the world of wine, pressing and moving the grape juice around and fermenting and such is an operation. Okay. The equipment and such that you use it might be high quality, low quality. Your hygiene is, your questions. Those are the things you're looking for. Just because you don't own your own, if you lease time on one, who cares? Right? It's a lot of what you do in the aging process and what quality control you're using during those processes, and the recipes and stuff you use. See also grain bills / yeast strains. So anyway, that idea of who does who, you'll get some people that are very passionate about products that are very much packaged to look like they've been around since gunfights were happening in Amarillo. And the answer is no, dude. They're produced out of freaking Indiana. They're relabeled as such. They're a subproduct and a byproduct of A and B. And also, they've only been they're selling you a 15-year-old whiskey, and they've only been in business for 5 years. Well, that means that they didn't probably start laying down that whiskey. They probably bought the product. So it's really hard sometimes, and this applies to spirits, it applies to beer, it applies to wine, of doing the extra effort to know where the stuff came from. How things are made is often a big thing. So I'm going to roll back here. Okay, John Kerry had a question that Donna said was good. Okay, so if you have time to burn, what can you tell us about the difference between Cab Sauv and Cab Franc? Well, I can tell you this. Cabernet Franc is Cabernet Sauvignon's father. Yes. I am your father. Obligatory joke. So Cabernet Sauvignon, we did the show on Friday, as a matter of fact, and this was not widely known / believed until I believe 1996, 97 is when they proved the genetic heritage of Cabernet Sauvignon is a blend of Sauvignon Blanc and Cabernet Franc. Okay, when you crossbreed those grapes, you get Cabernet Sauvignon. There was some disturbance at the time of the idea that could such a light white grape like Sauvignon Blanc, bear the dark, thick-skinned, heavyweight Cabernet Sauvignon. The answer is yeah. When you pair it up with Cab Franc, there you go. So Cabernet Sauvignon has exceeded Cabernet Franc many times over as the world's most popular red wine grape. But Cabernet Franc is still a major hitter in the Bordeaux blends. You'll occasionally see it as a monovarietal in Northern California as well, which is more in the Bordeaux style. And then you'll also have much lighter, racier, fun, almost Pinot Noir-like versions out in the Loire Valley in the regions of Semur, Champagny, Chinon, etc. Those wines are much more comparable to Pinot Noirs and Gamay. They're light, easy to drink. In fact, they're probably one of the ones I'm going to reference, although not one of the ones I'm using for the picnic wine series. Those lighter style French Cab Francs are a lot of fun. And then you get into these bigger, bolder, they're very similar to Cabernet Sauvignon in their Napa style, except that they have a uniqueness to them in this cedar, bell pepper, spice box notes that is just slightly different. I mean, comparatively, they're like, two different shades right off of one another. So an excellent exploration, I must say. Cabernet Franc as a uniqueness was one of the first big red wines I really fell in love with, and is probably one of my top 3 or 4 monovarietals. Although remember, monovarietal in that case in California just means, and you're looking at 75% or more. So it might be 80% Cab Franc and then some other stuff blended in, which effectively is the Bordeaux way, right? So a lot of what people think are, for instance, Cabernet Sauvignons are not 100% Cabernet Sauvignon, especially in Napa or Sonoma or the Central Coast. Okay, let's see. Mary has a Gießen Marlborough or Sauvignon Blanc, and Dave is drinking a Rioja Tempranillo 2016. You guys couldn't agree on a single bottle. You're just gonna get that kind of Wednesday. That's impressive. I salute you, Dave and Mary Thomas from Minnesota. That is respectable. I mean, and landing somewhere in the middle of that for dinner is going to be an interesting challenge, I must say. So. Tempranillo is perfect with turkey. Donna, that's an interesting take. I'm going to have to do some exploration on that. Now, how do you prepare your turkey is my question. Because that is in and of itself, we say with turkey is a fairly neutral canvas to play upon, but how we prepare it. I would even go so far as to say the modern day interpretation of the classic turkey dinner for the best holiday of the year is kind of has become at odds. What I have found in my cooking experience is that from a simple oven bake and baste to deep frying to how people spice their birds to inside or outside the bird seasonings / stuffings, there's a lot to be said with preparation of bird and how it changes the end product. It's not just turkey. That's like saying just beef. Right, you can do a lot of things to that protein somewhere in between. So I can see that the delightful smokiness of Tempranillo, that is one of the things I love so much. Its savory, smoky nature and its reasonable acidity. I could see it making the cut there, but it's not something I've ever actually jumped to as a first choice. So that's a very interesting note there, Donna. I like that. So what is John says he's drinking tasty 2015 Cab Franc from the Loire. Okay, so you're in the Loire. See there, you're in that fun space, which is again very different than its California buddy side. Roasted, of course, with lots of butter. It makes good, great well. It's all about that sauce. Got to get that pan gravy. I love it. It was recommended to me by one Thanksgiving, and they were totally right. So yeah, so normally my go-to, and we'll not to give spoilers that you guys are going to remember in November, but we'll do an entire turkey / Thanksgiving show, online tasting and such. So we will talk. I mean, my usual go-tos are Pinot Noir and Chard, depending on my mood. And actually, I really start to array it with what's around the turkey, because, as I said, as a neutral canvas with a well-salted brined bird on the outside, and so we our family generally doesn't fry turkeys, although I'm desperate to want to. Everybody's got to have a house fire from now and again, so worth a try. But anyway, the idea that how you cook up that skin, how you baste, all those things, and then what particular blend of herbs and spices, what your secret blend is an important note. So Some Cuban sandwiches with smoked pork. Is that the dinner that's going along with Sauvignon Blanc and Rioja? Well, that's Cubanos are a thing, man. They're an art form. I highly recommend you guys go watch the movie Chef, which is uh, I'm going to draw a total blank right now. Anyway, it's basically the story of a chef who goes and finds himself by basically starting a food truck in Miami and driving it back to LA and going everywhere in between. Um, but oh man, it's gonna bug me. He's the guy that directed Iron Man, for Christ's sake, and was starred in Swingers and is freaking awesome. John Favreau. Favreau, um, in training for this, basically befriended an LA chef, and they do a collaborative show called The Chef Show on Netflix. It's a documentary, and it's the two of them going around. And this is going to make me mad because I can't remember his name right now either. It's not David Chang, who's Chinese. It's the other guy who is Korean, and he is awesome. And anyway, John Favreau, learned at this guy's side how to look like a chef and do the chef things for all these shots in the chef movie. And they became great friends and have been cooking together ever since. And so they do all kinds of fun stuff in the chef show. And they were together across it, which, by the way, there was the first kind of outside reveal of Franklin's Barbecue in Austin when they show up and are talking at that particular place because they know they have to stop by it. It's all about the love of food and the love of the craft. So it's a heartwarming film for those of us who have, more respect for food than just consuming it. And Mary says she has indeed seen that. We have some pretty darn good Cuban restaurant here at a place called the International Bakery that does cubanos and does these amazing pastries, these guayabera and cheese pastries, and coffee, the likes of which a Falcon 9 rocket has not yet been fueled on. Cuban coffee will get you going. It's dense and delightful, and I think only the Turkish vie for a darker, meatier, high energy product than that. So, all right. We talked about what's upcoming for shows on the July calendar. Other things, fun product previews for those of you that care. So as we are coming through, I mean, our particular state is starting to suffer some reverb stuff from COVID-19, but individuals and personal risk levels, I think, are what you're starting to see, where people are meeting with individuals that they know and they trust, practice good hygiene, and are known to not be contagious. And so starting up doing small private tastings is something I'm considering for people that I know and trust, as opposed to just random strangers from the internet. But anyway, two new product offerings that are coming up for later this summer. Number one, the Designed for Your Perfect Afternoon. It is a grilled show. So basically, it's a backyard picnic kind of motif with 4 different courses and 4 different wines, and very much focused on have your grill, get out there, have a summer type picnic with wine, and show you some wine and food pairing there. And then my personal favorite new one desperately overdue, and that is our brunch show. Not limited to Sundays, mind you, but the idea of wake up and have yourself a fantastic breakfast brought to you and cooked by me, and right there in your very own home, have a 3-course breakfast with 3 different wines. Start your day off right with day drinking with WineShark. It'd be fantastic. So those things are going to be coming out, and as a 4th product, collaboration with Two Penny Beer and Bob Floyd over at Two Penny Beer. So that we'll do combo beer wine shows, which we have actually already done, but I have been neglectful in actually advertising and putting it together as an available product. So for those that are split households and mixed beverage folks, we've got an opportunity to do a beer and wine dinner option where basically each course is paired with a beer and a wine, and we teach you all of the things that we can squeeze into a 2-hour show when it comes to those topics. So that's a lot of fun. And again, really The great news is it exposes people who are in the I don't like wine or I don't like beer categories, and we don't want we don't like to hear that. We don't like I only drinks. So free your mind, your glass will follow, and I don't care what shape it's in. It's got a stem or not, does not matter. Although even some of the great beer glasses have stems. So whoa, conundrum. All right. Any other last questions before we wrap up? The true, actual closing time. Um, I would encourage you guys. Everybody was eerily silent during the discussion, but or rant rather. It wasn't really a discussion because I can't hear you. But I would love some discussion on this topic. This is one of those things that I think deserves a lot of attention from everybody and some real contemplation as to where you are on the line. Very thought provoking. The idea between factory production and artisanal production and craft, and when is it good and when is it bad, and where do you live on the spectrum? Um, you as a and again go back to your personal wine journey. Where are you? Are you just somebody that wants to drink wine and have a good time and bacchanal rock out, or is it something that you really want to understand a bit better? You want to study and appreciate, become a connoisseur of this particular art form. I'd love to see your comments below and start a discussion down there. So that'd be good. I like promoting local vineyards if I can. Well, and that's an interesting thing. I mean, local is another and separate topic, Donna, but a good one. That's the one area where I don't actually agree. Not that I don't want to support local, but I will not be limited in wine choices by local. Unlike the world of beer, where local is easy because you don't grow your hops right next to where you live, you buy the stuff from wherever. The viticulture is a unique agricultural product that is highly location based, and to limit myself to local would be very, very bad. Not just because of where I live. I don't care whether I lived in frickin' Bordeaux, right? Supporting local vineyards only would be a sad limitation. It'd be like saying I only listen to local music. To me, you're missing out on a global scape of things. So supporting him is awesome. I love it. I want him to do well, but also they have to compete at the level with everybody else, and that's one of the things I'm not going to get into at the 4-minute mark. But when we do our Texas wine show, I'll go into a little bit more about my ideas. I'm like, okay, just being local doesn't get you any special benefit points to me. You got to be local and good. Same way with beer, same way with food. Can't have trash can sushi, my friends. I'm just saying. So, but no, Mary, I don't want to hear your comments here. I want to see them in the comments on the video after it's produced. Because when you put the stuff in the chat, nobody sees it if they don't watch the video. That's why the conversation needs to move over there. I love the fact that we're here, but that's where I want to see those questions so that we can respond and go back there. So this will be up just a few minutes after I close the window, and it'll transcode pretty quickly. So repeat that question and we will get into that topic. Jason had a question of how many wines and what would they be if you'd serve true 7-course dinner on a formal. So the interesting thing is that usually that changes, and wines wouldn't be the only thing. But if you're like a 7-course formal, you're usually going to have an aperitif portion of your meal, which may involve more spirits, sherries, and which are technically wines, but still distilled products over here. Then you may also have wines, bubblies, etc. With each course, you're generally likely to have something that matches it in weight. So if you start off light and you say, let's say, soups and a cheese course in the early portion, or just soups, for instance, lighter fare. When you move on to mains, etc., you're going to start seeing more heavy wines that come to match. But your seafood dishes, for instance, if you downshift into a seafood dish, you're gonna ride a roller coaster of flavor intensity. I shouldn't do that in front of the camera. That was focus weird. And then you're gonna finish in the same way, where dessert level wines, etc., are gonna get you into this fun aspect of heavy versus light, depending on what type of fare you're completing with. Having that, are you having a cheese tray as dessert to complement the port that you're drinking? Or are you focusing on something else where the wine itself is a complement to it as opposed to the main star of the course? But The cool part about the 7 course that you mentioned, when you talk about full formal, you're likely to see just about all of the stops pulled out. You're probably going to encounter what I would call most big styles of wine. You're going to see light, dry, sparkling, possibly rosé. You're going to see, and depending on the weight of it, you're going to see light, medium, and full-bodied reds. You're going to see dessert styles. You're likely to see just about every tool in the shed when it comes to formal dining, because that's why those things were developed, right? It's where they fit on that palette of color that matches that flavor of food. Yeah. I mean, Donna, I know you see them when you rewatch it. But the problem is, if somebody's just clicked on the video and they're not looking, or they're looking at the chat, the channels below, the comments section is open to other things. So I want it in addition to the live chat. That's why I was encouraging it, because not everybody's going to sit there and listen to me for an hour. You guys are, a particular kind of cool, right? So we're in Minnesota. Oh, we got our local wine in Minnesota is very limiting. Yeah, I can imagine that. That would be a particular problem. And a lot of people are in areas that just don't grow wine. So there's a thing. All right. Well, we're just about hitting the hour mark here, guys. I'm sure I've bored you senseless, but I would appreciate each and every one of you for coming in here, for your comments, for your questions. If you like what we're doing, subscribe to the channel, share with a wine-loving friend, and hit that bell to get notified when new stuff comes out. Tomorrow, I'm going to film video and work on how to open bottles of wine and various types and tools, like your wine flat, etc., that we use to open them. We're going to be experimenting with B-roll footage and cool video techniques. But I also want to say a huge shout out. If you really like what we're doing, support us over on Patreon. So many of you guys are just so generous with your support over there. It keeps the project swimming in the right direction. I want to say a big shout out to our newest patron, to Matt Gilbert, and to our patron seller members who are so generous with their dollars and with their support. To Barbara, to Dan, to Matt W, Matt G, Dave, and Mary. I thank you guys so very much. So until next time, which will be hopefully a new video tomorrow. We'll see a new video tomorrow. We'll see you next time on WineShark Wednesday. Hope you guys join us for tastings. And until next time, I've been your WineShark. Cheers.